Farage announces Brexit 2.0, but before we go into that, I would like to advertise an article that is, of course, all in the spirit of self-determination and responsibility. Excellent. It is, if we can get the link up now, so I can see who it's...
The link's at the top of the document, John, if you can see that in the actual podcast document.
Yeah, it's called No Happiness in the Absence of Responsibility.
Apologies, we're only just starting to implement this properly on here. There we go.
Yes, this is written by Hannah Gao. So yes, and of course it's all about the fact that happiness is inseparable from one being free and self-determining, and of course...
I took a skim through this earlier. It's sort of based on a lot of Jordan Peterson's stuff. It talks about his most recent book, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life. As you can see, for any silver tier members that we've got in the audience... you'll be able to listen to that through the audio track, which is narrated by the wonderful Jonathan Crow.
Excellent. Okay, so, well, today is your lucky day if you're, of course, fed up with all of the black pills that we have been dropping, or at least this segment is a bit brighter. Brexit is back because Nigel Farage has today launched Brexit 2.0, sort of. The begging question, of course, is why has he done this? Well, the real answer is that we never really got what was promised us Brexiteers. That is. And this is for several reasons. First, there is the practicality of the Northern Irish border due to the reintroduction of two sets of customs regulations. There's the pro-EU lobbyists who wanted to retain closer economic ties at all costs. There was the fact that we played our hand very, very badly from the start, given that Theresa May agreed to pay, a £39 million divorce bill before we even discussed the terms of departure. There was a genuine legitimacy crisis about what Brexit amounted to, which was more among the politicians than among the Brexit voting public. But the biggest letdown of all is that we renewed our commitment to the European Convention of Human Rights and the political declaration that came alongside the withdrawal agreement. And this is what is ultimately causing the currently irresolvable problem with the migrants coming in from Calais. And this is because under the European Convention of Human Rights, we can't send the migrants back to France where they came from. So we've had to come up with an alternative way to stop something which you could call an invasion and provide a legal deterrence to prevent them from making the trip across the Channel in the first place. And we're currently under the European Court of Human Rights because of the political declaration, so we've had to go about this in a slightly alternative way. But if we actually get the article up here that actually shows why we're still tied into the European Court of Human Rights.
I will say that I don't know if they're going to address this specifically. In the recent Tory announcement that they're going to try and replace the Human Rights Act that we've got from 1998, the Blair government, currently they're trying to replace it with a British Bill of Rights. As part of that, they will include the ability to deport foreign prisoners who have been imprisoned here for a year. I don't know if they're going to address anything to do with the actual migrant crossings, though, or anything like that. And let's be honest, given the Tories' track record, I don't know if it's going to be all bark, no bite.
Yeah, well, we discussed this on a podcast a while back, didn't we? And we identified that it's very much dependent on a third country to actually being willing to hold the asylum seekers in transit whilst their applications are being processed. And we just couldn't work out why this would be appealing to anyone unless we just paid them a hell of a load of taxpayers' money in effect. But just to illustrate the extent of the problem that we're facing, if you actually go down to the numbers, you can see how much worse this problem has got in the last couple of years. So here it is, there we are. So in 2018, we had 297 who came across. In 2019, it was 1,823. Fast forward to last year, 28,431. And this year so far, 4,559. So that's considerably lower than the rate we were experiencing last year, so it seems. But it's still pretty high.
I'm honestly surprised that the numbers listed in 2018 and 2019 are so low.
Yeah, it's probably
the accuracy.
I would consider the accuracy as well, but of course you can't rely on the fact checkers for that. But Priti Patel introduced the Nationality and Borders Bill as a means of dealing with this issue, which would of course speed up the removal of failed asylum seekers, introduce maximum life sentences for people smugglers, stop illegal migrants from gaining immediate entry if they've travelled through a safe country to reach the UK, and it establishes some power to process asylum claims offshore for those who arrive via illegal routes. And as I said, this is dependent on a third party being willing to take in the failed asylum seekers, and as we've discussed before, we just couldn't see why this would be appealing. But reports have now emerged from the Times that Rwanda is this chosen country. And so Sky News reads on this very subject. The Prime Minister is edging closer to unveiling proposals to fly asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing and settlement, according to a report in The Times. The Home Office did not deny the reports, of a spokesperson telling Sky News, as set out in our new plan for immigration, we are committed to working closely with a range of international partners as we continue to fix our broken asylum system. But later on Tuesday, Minister for Refugees Lord Harrington told LBC there was no possibility of migrants being sent for processing in Rwanda. The newspaper said the plans, which were intended to be announced last week during a surge in migrants attempting to cross the Channel, could cost the UK millions. The original report contains a government source stating that the plans are close but not yet ready. It is suggested that ministers are said to be waiting for Home Secretary Priti Patel's Nationality and Borders Bill to pass through the Lords. And if we move on to the next, you can see the bill hasn't passed because the House of Lords are holding it up. Of course. Peers supported proposals, amendments to ensure that the bill compiled with the, guess what, 1951 Refugee Convention, and challenged the government's plan to redefine refugees into two classes based on how they arrived in the UK. I don't personally think they're making any claims or deducing them as a different class of people. I just think they're trying to act in the national interest to a genuine... of course, people are very, very concerned about this issue, and rightly so. But Nigel Farage has since weighed in on this. On this selection of Rwanda, or apparent selection of Rwanda. And this is in an interview with Dan Woosum. And he says he doesn't think it's a good solution either. So let's hear what he says.
Boris Johnson is set to announce plans to send illegal Channel migrants to Rwanda to be processed. The Home Office is neither confirming nor denying the reports. And you're not convinced of this as a plan?
Well, look, I mean, they have to do something, and they have ahead of May the 5th and the local elections to be seen to do something. I mean, just think about it. 28,500 people came across the Channel last year. At the moment, at the same time in the year, we're running at triple that figure. And they know, the Conservative Party, from their polling, that especially in the red wall seats, this is infuriating voters who thought by voting for Brexit and then voting Johnson in 2019, we'd get back control of our borders rather than be made an international laughingstock, as we currently are. Because we're part of the European Convention on Human Rights, returning people to France is not possible. Actually, Dan, even removing failed asylum seekers is very difficult, all the while we're signed up to ECHR. They had to do something, so offshore processing was the obvious thing.
Okay, so what he's saying, of course, is that something has got to be done. It's got to a ridiculous stage. Though, of course, the government probably have the elections in May in mind when kind of, you could say, leaking or unofficially announcing this policy. Because we're part of the European Courts of Human Rights, we can't send people back to France. And so moving failed asylum seekers on, if they can't be pushed back to France, is extremely difficult, given that they could end up back in their home country, where some of which still permits torture. And in Article 3 of the European Convention of Human Rights is the law that you can't send someone back to their parent country if that country could torture them on their return. So yes, this I suppose is the grounds for wanting to get rid of the European Court of Human Rights, because it would get away with that problem. Yeah. Though there was, of course, a moral imperative.
We always bring out, just kicking them out of England doesn't mean there's nowhere else safe that they can go to.
No, of course it doesn't.
I think that these restrictions that were are put on us as a sovereign nation are completely ridiculous. To be able to bring back some of the old classic Brexiteer language, to be able to determine our own destiny.
Well, yes, I mean that is, after all, what we voted to do. And if any one issue was, I suppose, above or had greater importance than any of the others, it was this. Immigration.
This was the primary thing that everybody
100%.
cited as to why they voted to leave.
Absolutely. And we're still being let down on that. That promise is still not being fulfilled.
Well, judging by those numbers that you were giving, whether I can see that they're accurate or not, it looks like the situation is just continuously getting worse, and will continue to get worse until we get ourselves in a position where we can actually take the training wheels off and do something about it.
And every opportunity they have to not cover it, they seem to take very, very, with open arms. But let's continue the video, because he goes into talk about the problem with the potential Rwanda arrangement.
What are the upsides? Well, the upside is, would you pay a trafficker €5,000 if you thought within 48 hours of coming into Dover, you might land in Rwanda? That's the possible upside. The downside is the cost per person will be simply vast. And it's only a matter of weeks or months before we start getting reports that people are being treated badly in camps in Rwanda, people are being abused, exploited. So I don't think long term this is the solution. And actually what I think is we need Brexit 2.0.
So there you have it, the apparently racist and xenophobic Nigel Farage having compassion for refugees, almost as if he's actually not a bad person at all.
To be fair, it is a good point. It's just because we don't want to be accepting these illegal migrants into our country and want to be able to protect our borders doesn't necessarily mean that we want to send them off somewhere where they'll be tortured or abused.
No, and it doesn't have a good human rights record, apparently. He does, of course, say that works in the agreement's favour to a point, because of course it might make the either the genuine refugees or the economic migrants posing as refugees think twice perhaps about attempting to make the journey if they think that's going to be the outcome. But then again, how are they necessarily going to know that? That's the question.
It could act as deterrent, but then, as you say, if the actual migrants themselves or refugees don't know that, but maybe the criminal smugglers do, criminal smugglers get paid either way. They don't care.
Yes, that's true. But if there is an imperative for people to not part with their money, then that would be a step in the right direction. But of course, we don't know how effective that would actually be. If they continue making the journey anyway and somehow get persuaded that this isn't the case and that Rwanda's actually a lovely place to be held up, then
there's nowhere else I'd rather be held.
There are a few other places maybe that come to mind, but it might not work practically, and it could be dreadfully cruel, in short. And I think Nigel has a point here. But anyway, let's go on to what he has to say about Brexit 2.0.
And Brexit 2.0 not only redefines the 1951 definition of what a refugee is, because it's hopelessly outdated in the modern world, but we have to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. We have to leave the auspices of that European Court in Strasbourg. That is the only way to, and I quote you, Boris Johnson, take back control of our borders. And until they do that, and nothing effective, really effective, is going to happen.
So, Brexit 2.0. From Nigel's description, we can gather that it involves ceasing to adhere to the 1951 Refugee Convention and to have a broader discussion about what a refugee ultimately is. I would readily agree with that, because we're being taken as fools as a country on this, to be quite frank. It also involves being free of the European Convention of Human Rights completely. I'm not sure what you would think of that, I suppose, given the potential implications for those genuine refugees who could be sent back and treated quite badly.
Well, if I imagine if we were to implement our own Bill of Rights, which isn't based on the European Convention's idea of human rights, but the sovereign British human rights, if it actually makes any tangible change, we can address that.
I think we can.
We can work for that. I don't see what the point of not being in the EU is anymore if we're still beholden to all of their courts and all of the bureaucracy that comes with them.
I fully agree. It's just, I suppose, there's the transitory phase from, of course, when we stop adhering to that legal structure and actually start adhering to another, and the complications involved in. You could say the bureaucratic structure, but I personally think that addressing this through a new British Bill of Rights is the best way to do it.
If they can get it right.
If they can get it correctly, yes.
Which hopefully they will. I don't really hold out much hope for Tory competence.
We need, as Nigel says, to completely leave the auspices of the European Court in Strasbourg. Only then we can take back control and be a truly self-determining nation, which is what every nation should, of course, be. So there we have it. So the project to deliver Brexit properly is very much on, you could say. It's not, of course, as seismic as the original referendum that we had, but I'm going to have to conclude on a slight black pill on this issue, because I honestly can't see how this can happen in our present system. Yeah. For a start, no Conservative politician who believes in such a plan, I don't think, would win a leadership election. No party outside of the Conservatives has a chance of running the country, to be quite frank. And well, if Labour got in, it's over, almost literally, on every front possible at this point.
I will say, possibly, given that it's what Boris ran on, with get Brexit done, it could be a potential chance for him to be able to re-establish some confidence in him after the past 2 years, I just don't see him doing it. It'd be far too risky a move for him.
Would he get enough support from the House, though, do you think?
I don't know.
I honestly don't know either. But there is one way you could go about this, and that is you can have another referendum. But given where that went and how long it took to deliver Brexit, that very idea fills me with dread. I don't know about you.
And sadly, we don't have another party on the level that UKIP was back in 2015, 2016, applying that pressure to the current establishment.
Yes. So in short, I'm going to keep a close eye on this because I very much hope this comes to fruition, but I'm sceptical, sadly.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this video that John Wheatley did, the J.R.R. Tolkien Collection, number 1 and 2. And if you want to find out what else John is putting out, you can follow him on Getter at John Wheatley on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.